Hello and welcome to the first episode of the podcast at the card table, in which we discuss creation, practice, performance, and history with the greatest minds of magic. If you're tuned in on YouTube, you will be watching an almost unedited video podcast of myself and the guest talking, but if you are tuned in on Apple or Spotify, you will be listening to a fine-tuned version that should be a lot audibly smoother. Either way, you're getting the same content, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Welcome to episode 1. Our first guest is not only one of the leading minds in modern mentalism, but he's also a creator, a consultant, and the owner of MindFX, releasing world-renowned products such as Beyond ESP, The Solution, and obviously bringing us the Minds Convention. It is obviously the incredible Michael Murray. Welcome, Michael. How are we doing today?
Thank you very much, Corey. An absolute pleasure to be here.
Perfect.
And it's an honor to be the first one as well. So
Yeah, I appreciate it massively. It's a very daunting thing starting
you
at the
couldn't find anybody
podcast.
better. That's what you're saying.
Starting at the bottom and working my way up. That's the plan. No, it's an absolute honor and privilege for you to spend your time with us and share some of that fountain of knowledge that you have. So, yeah, let's dive straight into it with.
We are talking about whiskey here, aren't we? We're not talking about anything else.
I was going to say, this is normally when we have conversations, when we're sat chatting about magic or methods or things like that. Obviously, we have a glass of whiskey in hand, a little bit of that creative nectar to help the conversation flow. But at midday on a Friday, it's probably not ideal. And it would dissolve into absolute chaos. So try and keep this as professional as physically possible for now. Obviously, the best way to get to know you is just a series of quickfire questions, just to go through some of your favorite things, your least favorite things, and maybe a few of your gripes within the magic community, because I know the magic community loves drama. So we'll throw some of that in there as well. So first question, obviously these never end up being quickfire questions. If you want to expand on them, please do so. What is your favorite sleight? This could be maybe a card sleight, it could be something to do with billets, it could be anything. What is your favorite go-to hand technique?
I suppose, in many respects, not because I physically perform it as part of any routine, but Leonard Green's laser deal. Because
Okay.
it's one of those things that just, absolutely floored me when I seen him perform it. And also, it's just one of those things that certainly in my years at Magicbox, which I'm presuming obviously we may discuss
Yeah, of course.
later on, I had a lot of time obviously behind the counter, and just to be able to practice that was great. So it's something which I feel that I do quite proficient. I never actually use it as part of a performance, but yeah, I just think it's just brilliant to watch. If you haven't seen it before, look up Leonard Green, watch his performances, you'll see him do it. It's yeah, fantastic.
It's such a beautiful piece of sleight of hand, and the simplicity, but also, I mean, it's both simple and complex in the way that it's done. Obviously, to do it well takes a lot of practice, but in actual nature, it's not as complicated as it looks. And
hmm
I think that makes it even more beautiful and easier to appreciate the skill that he's doing there. It's absolutely
Definitely.
stunning.
And it's also very different, I mean, most people, I suppose, if they were opting for a slight in the realm of magic, they would maybe talk about color changes and palms. So, it's a very unorthodox move, because, yes, a lot of people have come up and developed different ways of producing cards, changing cards, and so forth. But, just for an out and out clean vanish as you just deal it to the table. Yeah, it's
It's
beautiful.
ridiculous. And the applications for doing changes as you deal. And I've seen some people using coins and a multitude of other things in laser deals, which is just, yeah, the creativity and the applications for the move are also seemingly endless, which is really cool.
Yeah, they are indeed.
Next question is your favorite plot. This could be in either magic or mentalism or the broader realm of the magical world. It doesn't necessarily have to be in your niche. Do you have a particular favorite?
Yeah, I am going to move back to my niche, which is primarily the mentalism. And I have to say, think a card. That
Okay.
is, it's something which I've been working on for years, ever since I seen or Art Vandelay. I read Art Vandelay's book, Planes Mistaken as Stars, and he had like a very much a propless think a card revelation plot in there. And then I decided that, what I'd read didn't fit my personality. And I think ever since that, then, which I believe was way back in, might have been something like 2016. I've sort of been hooked on the plot since then, and obviously released many different variations, and
Yeah.
and obviously a book on the subject. isolation, and then Aureality, and then obviously the latest work with Polarity, the system, and it's continuing to this day. So yeah, definitely my favorite plot is Think to Card.
Yes, it's definitely something that I've seen pop up in your works many a time. But as you mentioned there, one of the cool things about mentalism, obviously you touched on it, is that if you have a technique or a routine or an idea that doesn't quite fit your personality, you can shape it and make it your own, even around just the core subject, which I think
Yeah,
opens up the possibilities for a multitude of very unique takes on mentalism, which is great to
yeah,
see.
that's it. You've got to have a starting point. You know, I read the concept, and the concept was somebody freely thinks of a card, and you can reveal it. And yes, I mightn't have necessarily liked Art's approach to it, but it was appealing enough for me to invest my own time and effort to create my own approach. You know, a brand new approach to it. So
Which is apparently what you do with absolutely everything, because you take a small idea and you run with it to the hills and you wring everything you possibly can out of it, which is great to see. And yeah, we'll get onto your creative process and your thinking later on, because I don't even want to know what goes on in that mind of yours. I imagine it's very heavily whiskey fueled, and the
generally.
ideas flow out. Whiskey and bacon sandwiches, I've heard. That's the
No, not bacon sandwich.
oh
I don't eat a lot of bacon. I've got nothing against bacon, but sausage sandwich. If I was going to
sausage
have a sandwich, yeah,
sandwiches.
with
There
some
we
nice
go.
chopped brown sauce on.
Take notes, people. This is the key to creativity right there. Next one is, do you have, I mean, this is like asking for a favorite child, but do you have a particular favorite book or favorite books that you'd like to highlight that maybe other people might not have heard of?
Favorite book? Yeah, it is very difficult because I've got a huge collection of books, and I've actually got a huge collection of books that I haven't read. So apologies if I own a book, if anybody's watching this, and I've got a book of theirs. I've maybe not mentioned it just because I haven't got around to reading it yet. I've got literally probably about a 4 or 5 foot pile of books that are sitting unopened. It's just obviously a case of not having time, but. I would say one book which I would strongly recommend everybody to have a look at is Design and Miracles by Darwin Ortiz. And that is irrelevant if you are interested in magic or mentalism. Um, Darwin was very much sort of renowned, or one of his sort of best book releases was Strong Magic in the eyes of many people. So, Strong Magic is probably the go to book from Darwin Ortiz, but I think Design and Miracles is actually far better. And a lot of the sort of techniques and the ideas from that book can apply to both magic and mentalism. And therein, I think, lies a very important point because for me, the true measure of a book is not in the like effects, because I believe that we've all got enough effects. You know, I think we could do ourselves a service by actually not buying any more books and just keeping the effects that we already have. But books which obviously detail philosophy and you know and sound advice on how to actually improve what we're already doing, I think are things that I think are worth the weight in gold. And you know, really, any book that gets you to think and consider what you're doing and how to improve it is worth its weight in gold. And Design of Miracles is certainly one of those. Also, another little recommendation, which is not magic related, but that's another book that I've just started reading called Tuesdays with Maury. And it's got nothing at all to do with magic. It's actually a true story about a guy who knows that his life's ending. He's got basically a disease which is slowly killing him. And the advice that he sort of shares with people is really advice that we need to listen to. You've got to sort of understand what is and what isn't important in life. And having this perspective from somebody who knows that he's going to die, the advice that he gives is great. And I think we're quite blinkered as humans. We'll get on with our lives and we don't really stop to consider what is and what isn't important. So I think we need to sort of have a look at the bigger picture. Magic, yeah, it's great. Mentalism is great, but I think that there are ultimately more important things in life and more important messages which can actually be delivered through the medium of performance as well. So yeah, Tuesdays with Maury, look it up. True story.
I
Um,
shall add it to
and
the
yeah,
list.
very good.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that first point that you made about um more creative and conceptual books over like trick. I'm currently reading through Maximum Entertainment again.
Yes,
The likes of,
brilliant.
obviously, as you mentioned, Designing Miracles and things like that. I think that the hidden gems in those books can absolutely change even the way you think and create and perform. Like it could just be the smallest thing. It's like the butterfly effect.
Hmm.
Obviously, that ripple, that tiny little thought change, and you think, you know what, maybe I should rethink the way that I'm doing this, and it can make a massive, massive difference. And I think that's also one of the things that I'd like to see more in lectures. I
Yes,
think a lot of lectures are very much here's a trick, here's a trick, here's a
effective.
trick. I'd love to sit and listen to just somebody dump their brain on magic. Hence the podcast. I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
makes
definitely.
sense.
No, I couldn't agree more. Like I don't do a lot of lectures, but and I'll be honest, I don't really like doing them because obviously the type of material that I want to share is often not the type of material that most people are receptive to because I think people are too used to going to lectures and learning effects. You
Yeah,
know, you go in, okay, what effects have you learned, or and I think it's I think that needs to change. If anything else, I think people need to ultimately learn to think on their feet. We
yeah,
will be talking about creativity, but people need to know how to create themselves and how to develop their ideas. So yeah, definitely that advice is
yeah.
certainly something which I would always push. And also um, when it comes to like principles and ideas, because they're the sort of building blocks for actually creating your own routines. So again, more of those. If I sort of read a book, I'm not really interested in the routines, but if I break down the routines and extract sort of principles and techniques that I can use in other ways, very much obviously akin to sleights, because sleights can, as we've already discussed, can be used in a multitude of different ways to create different routines. Like the laser deal can be a vanish of a card. I know Leonard Green also uses it as a sort of almost like an out of this world of sorts as he's dealing the cards face up.
Sorting.
The cards
Yeah,
separate red and black. It's really interesting to sort of explore those avenues and the different directions you can take that knowledge in. So yeah.
yeah. I think sort of expanding upon magicians' toolboxes is probably the best way to go about it because I think again knowing obviously myself and other performers and people that are doing this like full time working close up and stuff like that, chances are you're probably not going to put a brand new thing into your repertoire. You're going to
Yes.
be doing the same stuff that you've been working for a long time. So it's whether you're gaining as much from those lectures as you would if somebody was like, here's my thought on this, and then you can apply those principles and you can help
Mhm.
elevate the stuff that you're already doing as opposed to maybe working new things in. Obviously, people do bring new things in and they change it up from
Mhm.
time to time, but I think for the most part, a lot of people are
Yeah,
doing
and it's
the same stuff.
understanding the way that things work as well and why they work. I remember like many years ago, there's a performer, you know him from the Northeast, Paul Litton,
Yeah,
and he used to perform a vanish of a deck of cards, and the reaction that he got was amazing, and I understood the concept and how he actually achieved it. And I went out to perform it myself, and I just wasn't getting the reactions. And I like really couldn't understand why. And there was an older guy, John Stoko, who was just a fantastic gentleman, and he suggested just like making this small change to the routine. And he said, "Look, you need to highlight the moment where the deck is seemingly there before it vanishes." And he said, "That's what I've noticed missing." And it was just that little bit of advice. When I took that on board and started performing it, then the reactions went through the roof. But it's the little bits of general advice on how to improve the routines that we're already doing, which make all of the difference.
yeah, it's
Um,
that 1% principle in life, isn't it?
yeah,
Those
yeah,
those micro changes add up massively over time.
hmm, definitely.
If I was to have to ask you, do you have a particular favorite performance or performer that you've watched or something that sticks to mind? Obviously, for
Hmm.
myself, the likes of In and of Itself by Derek Del Gaudio is probably one of the most moving magic pieces I've ever seen. So that sort of sticks out immediately. Is there anything that springs to mind for you or anyone that springs to mind for you in particular?
Well, there's two that I can be immediately drawn to. One was when I actually went to London to watch Azzy Wind perform. It was like a public performance, although there were a few magicians that were there, and it was a really eye-opening experience watching him work because a lot of the material that he was doing was very simplistic. I mean, I'm not going to go too much into methods, but the some of the first things, like the very first book that I bought on card magic, this is before I even got involved in sleight of hand, contains some basic methods for forcing cards, controlling cards, and those really in the later books that I read had disappeared. So it's almost like these are beginners' techniques.
Yeah.
And now, basically, as you learn, like imagine like Card College is probably the perfect example. The type of material you learn in Card College 1 is very basic. Then you work through to, I think it went to volume 5. And then all of a sudden, you're now doing advanced sleights. And you forget about the earlier stuff because you think, okay, well, that's just the basic stuff. That's
Yeah.
what everybody learns. But as he was including that material, he was using those techniques within his performance. And the reactions that he was getting from them were absolutely phenomenal. And it was really eye opening because it's like, it's techniques that I would have just, well, I had dismissed, that I
Yeah.
would just think, now, that's the child stuff, that's the stuff you learn when you're first getting into to card magic, or mentalism, or whatever it may be, and it's just dismissed because it's like it's the beginner stuff. But you just really highlighted that a lot of what we learn as beginners can still be used successfully. And and this was like a paid public performance, and it wasn't a cheap performance. I believe the tickets were about £100 each. And when he started using these techniques, I'm like, hold on, this is a bit. But then when I watched the reactions on the audience's face, they were like, I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
missing the trick here.
It's something I've noticed quite a lot with sort of prevalent card magicians recently as well, by the likes of Ben Earl.
Yes.
A lot of the stuff that he's performing, super
Yeah.
simplistic by nature, but the reactions and the storytelling just make the world of difference. And even though obviously methodology wise it is simple or easy to do, it's how it's presented. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the cool things about magic is it doesn't matter what you're doing, because to a layperson they're not seeing how it's done, they're
Yeah.
seeing the effect it creates and what it
Mhm.
means to them.
But again, it sort of draws reference back to what I said earlier with obviously my old friend John Stoke was sadly no longer with us. And it was really interesting to see the way that he presented those, because obviously, as he very much made those techniques his own, like the sort of finesses, the fundamental technique remained the same, but how he actually presented them and how he justified what he was doing, that really showed, like a superb level of thinking, because he had sort of elevated it from, something that we've all learned and we've all covered in the past, to something that does fly in the real world. So yeah, that was definitely a very eye-opening experience for me. And I really do understand, because I don't do a lot of like public performances. I don't do a lot of, because I consider myself to be more of a creator than a performer. But I do understand the necessity to have routines. I mean, as he's very technically gifted anyway, so he is very capable of doing sleights, and he does some fantastic work in that regard. And he puts the practice in there. But I think a lot of the performers really appreciate the value in being able to use techniques that they understand inside out. They're going to work, so they can concentrate their efforts on the presentation, and that really shone through in that performance. So that's one poignant sort of moment and a very eye-opening experience for me. But exactly as you say, Ben Earl does exactly the same. Again, he's probably one of the most gifted, technically speaking, in the UK. But that doesn't mean that he shies away from some of the most basic, sleights. And yeah, is brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it helps really expand on the creativity of what people are doing, and I think that's why you're then reliant on the story, you're reliant on sort of what you're trying, the emotions that you're trying to convey, or the connection that you're trying to make. It's more reliant on that than just raw
Mhm.
technique and knuckle busting sleights.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit telling that whilst they are technically gifted, they use the right tool for the right job. So they'll not throw in a technical move just for the sake of it,
Yeah.
because they can do it. It's what's right for the routine. You know.
Yeah, and I think having read the likes of The Psychology of Magic, which is another fantastic book, even some of the most simple things, like obviously a crosscut, um, absolutely decimates like lay people.
Mhm.
But to us, we think there's no way that would fly. And I
Yeah.
mean, there's psychologists now doing studies to prove that that's absolutely not the case, even to the point
Mhm.
where there's no misdirection, there's no time delay principle. Like, it's just raw, and it's still absolutely killing, and people
Yeah.
aren't even spotting what's happening.
So the basically there's a bit of advice to take from that, and that is to revisit some of the early works. If you've got Card College, just because you've reached the final book in the series doesn't mean okay that's the material that you
Yeah,
should be sticking to. Go back to the very beginning and try the material again from volume one. If you like a lot of the techniques, the cut deeper force, etc. Mark Wilson's complete course in magic, that was probably the first book that I ever got, and well, actually, even my son started. I give him my actual physical copy, and he started learning techniques from then. Fooling the grandparents by obviously performing material from it, and you know, it just shows. My parents, witnessed a lot of my performances. Well, probably think my son's better than me anyway, to be honest. But it just shows we shouldn't be dismissing anything because it's easy.
yeah,
I think that's an important point as well. Because it's easy doesn't mean that it should be dismissed.
yeah, 100%. You mentioned at the start of that you had two performances in mind. I'm gonna
Yeah,
wrangle you back to the second one just out of
yeah,
curiosity.
the other one's probably a little bit of an unorthodox one because I'm not into stage illusions, but one sort of poignant performance that I did see was one of the rare times that I was at Blackpool and I went to see the sort of the big show that they have. And Hans Klock was there. And like I generally don't go in to watch stage performers, but the illusion that he performed was superb. He had like a table, and there was like a sort of little cage on one side. He put the girl in, covered it up, and the spikes went through. And I'm sitting right near the front, and I'm following along with everything in my mind because that's just the way my mind works. I'm
Yeah,
just sort of, I'm reasoning the methods as I watch. It's hard for me to dissociate
it's
that. And then
difficult to fall out of that.
it
Like
is,
watching
yeah,
Britain's Got Talent and stuff on TV, and you're just constantly
it is.
cycling.
You fall into the mindset, and then the girl vanished, and I was like, yeah. And then obviously the spikes came out, and then he sort of waved this cloth, and then a girl standing on the stage on the platform with him, and I'm like, yeah, like up to that point, everything was just yeah. So what sort of thing? I've seen it before, and then he waved again, and that was another girl, and then another girl, and I'm like, and maybe I don't know as much as I thought. And I know what had to happen to make it work, but that didn't distract from just how amazing it was. So,
Yeah, I think as a magician, being able to appreciate the methodology and things like that, I find it thoroughly enjoyable when magicians put little things in for other magicians to pick
mhm.
up on, just as like a kick in the teeth,
Yeah,
just as
little
like a you
little sort of
thought you were
Easter eggs along
following,
the way. Yeah.
but
Mhm.
yeah,
But
that's
and,
I
and
love
and it
that.
was great because he'll have known obviously the audience was primarily made up of magicians and they understand so much, but then it sort of really inspires you, I suppose, as a performer to think, okay, you think you've got everything summed up, but then you realize actually you haven't. There's more ground that can be paved. So yeah, not that, as I say, I don't do stage illusions. I'm not interested in them, although I did actually create one that Copperfield was interested in.
Oh,
um,
okay.
but and yeah, yeah. I was speaking to Chris Kenner. He was gonna purchase the rights to that. But yeah, so that was just a little idle thought.
That's very, very cool. Oh, incredible. That sort of perfectly segues into obviously you take a lot of inspiration from everything that you ingest, whether it be books, whether it be performances, whether it be even just conversations with people. Who would you say have been your main influences in what you do and where you are today? This doesn't necessarily have to say strictly within sort of the magic and mentalism realm, but if you had like three, four, five people that you think these are staples in where I am, who would they be?
Well, I would say certainly for my where I am at present, Darren. I have to say, obviously, if it hadn't have been for him, I probably wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't mind FX wouldn't exist, and I probably wouldn't have embarked on the road of mentalism because I just simply didn't like it, to be honest,
Yeah.
until I saw Darren. So he's certainly the one responsible for my current position. In the past, there has been Bill Malone, who is probably my all-time favorite magician. Not only is he very funny, he's obviously a comedian in his own right, but he's technically very gifted. and the two things just work together so well. He's, I mean, a lot of people say David Williamson, who is very funny, but no, for me, my money's on Bill. And I also managed to fool him. I've got a video of me fooling Bill Malone once, which is very good. But he made me promise that I don't share, because he does swear on it. But yeah, so that was a pleasure to do that. So yeah, Bill Malone, I think magic wise, obviously Leonard Green.
Yep.
I did sort of invest time in obviously learning his material. Again, not to perform really, just that was just for my own personal enjoyment. So Leonard Green, Guy Hollingworth as well. I would label him again. The interesting thing about Guy is just the fact that he's just such a nice guy. I actually met him at Blackpool this year, 2025, and offered to buy him a drink because he just spent a lot of time with me when I was younger. I was trying to learn his chords through the pocket routine. And he didn't know me. He had no reason to spend time with me to help me in any way. But he must have spent about 20 minutes just going through the sort of finesses. So, I think for me, the character and the personality of a person really sort of inspires me more than anything else.
Yeah.
The fact that he took time out of his day to help me just shows the measure of the man. So he's got me utmost respect.
Time is the most valuable thing that anyone has, and I
Yeah,
think for people to offer that out,
yeah, because
to
it's the
help.
only thing that you can give but never get back. So yeah,
Exactly. And obviously those little things that people do for people evidently shape the future of what's going to happen. So those little moments that people take can
yeah.
be monumental in the grand scheme of things.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And then I think more recently, I think a lot of my sort of inspiration has came from Gabrielle Valen, who's a fantastic performer, mentalism performer. His material's superb, but again, like a lot of it just resonates so well with me. He's obviously famous for the green neck system, but very talented. Again, just such a nice guy. He likes to sit down and spend time with people. He's very, very good. And then one other entry which I'll throw into the mix as well. I know you said about 4 or 5. I probably read about 10 off. But Fernando Figueras, and if you haven't
Yeah.
seen Fernando work, you need to get the Penguin live lecture, because it's exactly what I was talking about before with regards to it's not about the routines. I mean, if you watch his Penguin live lecture, his routines are superb, but it's the philosophy, it's the approach, it's the thinking that's actually gone behind those routines, which again can be extracted and applied to different, to your own work. So yeah, definitely do yourself a favor. Fernando Figueras, superb.
Perfect.
And again, another nice guy as well.
A lot of names to ponder and look into. So
Yeah.
thank you for that, and thank you for sharing with obviously the other people as well. We're gonna get on to one last sort of quick fire question before we get into the main crux of this, and this is the most controversial question, which is, what is your magic industry gripe? What do you think frustrates you to see in the magic industry, whether it be something that you think's overdone or something that you think just doesn't deserve to be in the community?
Well, I can answer that honestly, and it's probably not in the same vein that the questions asked, but piracy.
Yeah, huge.
Without a shadow of a doubt, that's my biggest gripe. Um, I did have two businesses. I had the World of Mentalism, pardon me, which was primarily a digital download store, which I had to close as a result of piracy. And it's, there are sort of big companies out there that, specialize in just ripping people off and obviously, scanning books and, copying digital media to sell on. But the problem's actually bigger than that, because it's rife within the community itself, because people in general don't realize the damage that they're doing. What they'll do is you'll maybe buy a book or like a download, and then what you might do is you might think, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share it with my friend, and
Yeah.
you think you're doing a favor, saving your friend a couple of pounds. So basically you pass it on to your friend, and that's a nice friendly thing to do. Your mate was interested in it too, so look, why don't we just share it, or go half us, and you get access to the copy and I get access to the copy. But then this friend thinks, oh, I think I know a friend
Share
that
it
might
with
be
him.
interested in that. So why don't? Yeah, there you are. And there's a little gift for you. And
Yeah.
then, and then all of a sudden that basically goes on. So everybody's, they're not, don't get us wrong, I don't think they're being purposefully malicious, but the problem is it's like a I don't know if this is the right term, but like a pyramid. Like,
Yeah,
you're starting off with the one copy, and then obviously it's shared between two, and then four, and then all of a sudden it basically it snowballs on. So everybody's thinking that they're doing a favor, but you really don't appreciate the bigger picture if you step back and ultimately looked at how many times this file has been shared. And I can
yeah,
actually quantify this because I did actually mark, I took the liberty of producing one particular book, and every single copy that went out, I changed, irrelevant of who it went to. And then also, I had like for the Facebook group to get in, I had basically answer this key question. And basically, we'll give you access to the group. So basically, I had like an Excel sheet, basically everybody's names, everybody's emails, and then the amount of times that people are answering
that's
the question, and
specific.
then
Yeah,
basically I can search back on my file, and I know who's shared those files. But it was an interesting thing for me, just really all I wanted to do initially with that is basically find out who was sharing the files.
yeah,
But then it became clear just how far that sharing went. And ultimately, those files ultimately ended up on one of the main download stores, the pirate stores, and then, as I say, the amount of people sort of requesting access, it is really it's a huge problem. So that is probably my biggest gripe. If you're looking beyond that, I would say my second biggest gripe is releasing for the sake of releasing. I
yeah.
consider myself to be a creator, and I do create a lot, but if you look at how many effects are physically released, it's minimal. And just because you can create doesn't mean that you should be releasing. So I'd like to see people sort of hold back and think, okay, is what I've got better than what's on the market already? Is it improving things? Is it not? Rather than just releasing it maybe to make a few
For the
pounds.
sake of it. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a dilution of the quality of what's available to people. So yeah.
It also makes it significantly harder for the likes of people looking to purchase stuff because then there's more stuff on the market and you don't know what you're
Mhm.
looking for. And I think obviously there's that like in the now bias of, oh, it's the newest thing, therefore it must be the newest best version of that thing,
Yeah,
and therefore
yeah, the
people will go purchase
current
it. They'll
best.
not
Mhm.
look at previous stuff that might necessarily be better, and then obviously you're then stuck with what could be potentially one of the worst products put out. But and
Yeah.
then and then it goes in that
Yeah,
magic drawer that everyone has and never sees the light of day.
yeah, it's a real shame because I do know a lot of sort of very talented performers who've sort of fallen into that trap. I mean, I'll not name names. A lot, I've got a lot of close friends who, maybe have fallen into that trap if they're honest with themselves. And it's a shame because obviously they are capable of so much more. The
Yeah,
quality of the material that they're capable of producing, have produced, and still continue to produce can be very good. But unfortunately, it's really, I suppose, down to the motivation. I think you've got to really ask yourself the question: why am I releasing this? Is
yeah,
is it is it because it's improving something, or is it because I want to make a bit money? And if the answer to that, if be honest
a
with
lot there.
yourself,
Yeah,
and if the answer is because I want to make a little bit of money, then perhaps obviously, that's not the thing to do.
yeah. 100% agree with both those points. I think, as you mentioned with the first point, like people don't understand the repercussions of, as you said, like one person shares it than the other person. But if that's a £60 product, that's £60, then 120, then 180.
Yeah,
That's being taken from the creator, being taken
yeah.
from like their families. Like,
And it becomes less inspiring for people to create. And again, I've seen many talented performers or many talented creators decide not to release material as a
yeah,
result of that, which is really sad because obviously the magic and the mentalism community's missing out, because they've certainly got the ideas, but they're just reluctant to release it.
yeah. And I think it's gotten to the point now where people are putting up paywalls or like vetting procedures for people to purchase stuff
hmm
to then.
Yeah, and it's things which I've considered myself, but then obviously, yeah, unfortunately penalising a lot of sort of people who are buying for the right reasons as
Yeah.
well. Making it more difficult for them. So there is no easy solution to it. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
it is a big problem.
I feel like I might have to change the structuring of those quickfire questions because it's like positivity, 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 bam, negativity, and then I'm like, so what's your origin story? Might have to flip some of those around to bring it full circle, but no, I think it's stuff that needs mentioned. And obviously, there's no way for the Magic community to change for the better without these kind of things being brought into light, and obviously creators like yourself mentioning it.
Mhm.
Obviously, people can then put a face to the name of the person that they're taking from,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah. Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's horrible, but unfortunately it happens, and I think it'll happen going forwards. But if we can figure something out to try and stop it, then we shall see how
Mhm.
that goes.
Yeah, definitely.
But on a slightly less negative note, let's pull this back into the main crux of this, and start from the beginning.
Mhm.
Obviously, you are a magic creator, you're a mentalism creator, and consultant and things like that. But how did this first start? How did you first get into mentalism? Like, what's your origin story?
So are we talking origin for mentalism or we're talking origin for magic?
Oh, let's go with origin for magic and then pick up mentalism as we
Okay.
as we go through that journey.
I'll expedite it as best I can.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I used to go to my auntie and uncle's house every, it was New Year. Was it New Year? It was around Christmas time anyway. Used to have a huge family party, and one of my cousins performed for me the Svengali deck, and I was absolutely blown away by it. I like just literally had no clue. I wanted to know how it worked, and he did the right thing. He didn't probably the best thing that he could have done, certainly for me to be where I am now, because he didn't tell me how it worked. So I was quite frustrated by that. So I actually went to the local library and I got all of the books that I could on magic and started learning some basic sleight of hand techniques and some basic routines so that by the next year, by the following year, I had something to show him. So then I done a routine for him, and to be honest, I can't even remember what it was that I done, but all I remember was him begging me for me to tell him how that worked.
Roles reversed.
So
Love that.
and it was great. Well, actually, he wasn't the only one. Everyone's, come on, explain, explain. And I was like, as proud as punch because I was actually very shy as a child. And that sort of really coaxed us out. But, I really enjoyed the sort of family party and being able to fool adults. And eventually we actually shared secrets. And I think that was probably the instigating point that really got me into magic. Then I heard from a friend of mine whose father owned a business in town that a company called Magicbox was opening. So I actually was their very first customer. I was standing outside of the shop. Went in. There was actually no magic on display. So Clive Richardson, who owned the business, he actually went through the back and brought out some cardboard boxes and basically filtered through. And I had £70 to spend. And all I remember, I can't remember everything that I purchased, but I ended up with a candle through arm, Sam Dalal candle through arm. And I also ended up with a Tenyo effect, which was like a zigzag card effect. Which was very clever. Yeah, obviously became a regular customer of Magicbox. I then was invited to have a job there, which basically I was at the Northern Rock at the time. I left the Northern Rock to sort of to work for Magicbox as a demonstrator in store, and then sort of that went on and until I actually saw Darren perform on TV. And as I say, I had no interest in mentalism at that point in time. Mentalism didn't appeal to me. Every mentalism performance that I saw really followed the same pattern. And I mean, I must admit, I didn't see a lot, but what I did see was, think of a name, and then it was a
Yeah.
revelation of a name. Think of a country, and they would reveal that. Think of a color, and they would reveal that. Think of a number, whatever it was, and it was just sort of, to me, it was all the same thing. And if anybody was to believe that anybody could read a mind, it doing a performance in that way didn't get any more impressive. So if I could really read your mind, Corey, and say, think of a number, and I said, you're thinking of 22, yes, and you'd be really impressed. And then I said, okay, think of a country. Okay, you're thinking of France. And then you'd be, oh, this is amazing. But then if I continued to do that, by the time I'd done it the 20th time, you just take it on board. Yeah, well, actually, you can really do it. Doing it 20, 21 times, 99 times, it doesn't become any more impressive. So it was just sort of the general approach to mentalism was quite linear. But when Darren sort of hit the scene, he made it believable. And even though I'd actually met and sat in Darren's company at Landed No at the IBM convention, I'd totally forgot about that until a mutual friend of ours, Lido van der Laan, had mentioned that we were in his company. I totally forgot about that and saw him on TV, and I totally believed everything that was going on. I was really invested. Obviously, Darren was talking about using NLP and all of these type of things. So I was right. Okay, I'm going straight to the bookshop the next day. Waterstones. Have you got any books on NLP? And I'm buying the books too and reading them, looking for the method so that I can replicate what Darren does. And Darren's brilliant. I mean, yes, obviously he does use real elements of hypnosis and elements of NLP, and obviously there's other things as well. But his just entire approach, it resonated with me. And I think it resonated with me for a particular reason, because I was very shy. And I think that probably surprised people who aren't previously aware of that.
It doesn't sound like you now.
I still to this day consider myself to be quite shy. Certainly nowhere near as bad as I was. But Darren's focus was not really on him as a performer. It was on other people. So like the performance with the two twins where they had the boards and they end up writing the same information. It was really eye-opening because, it all of a sudden it wasn't about the performer, and he sort of, in my mind, that the sort of a term bandied about spectator as mind reader. It's like a like a classification of a style of performance, but it really opened my eyes to think, okay, I can still perform, but I don't necessarily have to be the focus of this. It can be the focus can be on the people and what innate gifts that they have and what special things that they can do. It ceased to be about the performer, and it was more about the people who are taking part in the experiments, and I love that. And I was like, yeah, okay, this is really where I want to be going. I mean, obviously, the road has sort of weaved in and out because obviously I do still draw back to, my magic roots. But yeah, Darren, without a shadow of doubt, sort of shaped my entrance into mentalism, and that's basically what's inspired me to do exactly what I do today.
Yeah, it's strange that you mentioned obviously the sort of linear nature of mentalism pre-Darren. But now looking at post Darren, it's come almost full circle where there's a lot of Darren-esque performance types, which is it's funny to see. Obviously, coming from everybody being the same to then everybody being the same again.
It is, yeah, and it's quite well. Obviously, it was a very refreshing approach. As you said, the problem is the byproduct is a lot of people have sort of adopted sort of his style. And ran with it, and I'm guilty as charged myself. I do sort of try to pave my own way, but it's hard not to be influenced by somebody who you really admire. But it's nice that from there we have likes of Colin Cloud and Ben Cardall with a like Sherlockian approach.
Yep.
So it's nice to see the different sort of performance styles coming in. Obviously, Luke Jamay, he had a fantastic book that he released, and I can't remember the title now, but it was like really, I suppose, cutting edge mentalism that bordered on like on the psychic approach. So it's stuff like I read and I'm like, I haven't got the kahunas to perform that material. Like I was like, I really love it, but I could never, I would never have the kahunas to perform that material. But it's nice, and I'm not saying that even Luke was influenced by Darren, because obviously Luke was already on the scene, but his style has changed over the years. But it's sort of nice that it sort of sparked the fact that we don't have to stick to that linear approach, and we can try different ways. whether it be body language, reading, deductive abilities, Sherlockian approach, and and there's many more different styles to be explored. So yeah.
Yeah, I think those different styles really help people stand out in what
Mhm.
is obviously, as you say, a very copycat-esque sort of
Yeah, that's
approach.
it. That's it. Unfortunately, because Darren, created such a huge mark, it unfortunately did, as a byproduct, create like a lot of Darren clones. I mean, I think I remember, not that I physically saw this myself, but I remember reading online that, that there was a bunch of performers sort of, copying these mannerisms and so forth in the performances, which, like,
Yeah,
you've got to draw the line somewhere. I think
it's
a little bit
crazy,
left the
man.
mark with that, yeah, but yeah, very, very inspiring, and also again it has to be mentioned. Such a lovely guy, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know a lot of people who have sort of climbed the ladder of fame, and they've, unfortunately, they've started developing a bit of an ego, which is like a real shame again, because, some of these again are friends of mine, who are, certainly still nice in front of me, but I've seen their personalities change, and
yeah,
unfortunately not for the better. Whereas Darren, in all the times I've ever met him, he's always remained grounded, and approachable, and he's yeah, just a genuinely nice person. And that again, you know, is an inspiration for that reason.
yeah. It's those kinds of people that stand out because, well, I mean, the other type of people also stand out, but not for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So it's definitely nice to see. And again, I think that's one thing that might come up in the future with Magic industry gripes is
Hmm.
egos within the community because
Yeah.
as I agree, it's a
There's
big
no
thing
place for them.
that's
There's no place for them.
nah. Obviously, if people don't know this, I also used to work at Magicbox. That's where we first met. You went from Magicbox and you took what you were doing there, obviously doing demo stuff. You then launched a few things through them. Obviously the likes of Beyond ESP, Sublime Influence, a few other bits and pieces, and then you moved to create your own brand, which was MindFX. How did you go from being a demonstrator working under somebody else's company to then taking your own ideas and thinking, you know what, I'm gonna run with this and see what I can do myself?
Yeah. So it was really interesting, and it really boils down to having children. That's basically, that's the real sort of instigating reason why I left, because I did work there for many years. Then I became a partner in the company. And so the Magic Box, as you know, for anybody who doesn't know, was very busy at Halloween. We used to have like huge queues up the lane. We were physically on the news. We had sort of newspaper reports and news coverage because of the size of the queues that we had. We sold fireworks, so obviously during Guy Fawkes, it was very busy. Then we would, turn up to work early. Well, I was always late, but we'll not mention that.
I
But
was gonna say I'm gonna hold you against that one.
yeah, but I turned up to work when I decided to get out of bed, um, and obviously would work late. And then because there was also the fancy dress side of the business, the likes of sort of Christmas, New Year, all those times it was very busy. So the problem was the business itself was very busy at the times where are the key times where my children wanted to spend time with me.
Yeah.
So like Halloween, they would obviously want to go trick or treating. When it got to Christmas, they would want to be taken out to see Santa Claus, and all of those key times, like for guy folks that want to go to a firework display, but I couldn't take my firework display because obviously I was busy selling them, or even at one point we were doing displays ourselves, which I was trained to do. Um, I didn't do a very good job of it, but I did do it. Uh, but yeah, it was those sort of key times. So I sort of really, having children really sort of changed my perspective on what was important in life. And again, it sort of skips back to what I mentioned before about that book Tuesdays with Murray. You really need to sit and analyze what is very important in life. And for me, it was obviously spending time with my children. Um, and in order to do that, obviously I couldn't stay at Magicbox, because obviously what am I meant to say? Okay, unfortunately I can't work the hours where the
The busy
business needs
hours.
me. So it was really a very daunting time. So obviously throughout my years working at Magicbox, I sold countless effects. I also read countless books, and obviously during that time I'd actually sort of collated together a lot of ideas of my own. Obviously, these weren't ideas that could be released as physical effects because we've already mentioned I did release physical effects through Magicbox, like Beyond ASP, which I think has sold about 20,000 copies to date. So that's certainly my most successful release. But these were ideas that weren't worthy of a like physical release, that weren't like a physical product. So what I decided to do was to collate all of those ideas together and put them into a book, and that was the primary book that I released, which was A Piece of My Mind, in what I thought, well, the limited edition one, nonetheless. And I thought to myself, okay, let's float this out, and if there's enough interest in my work, then I will consider setting up, obviously, a business of my own. So that is basically the direction I took. I released the book. The book did very well. I think we've sold out probably about 4 times over. So there's a good few thousand copies of that book have been sold over the years. And yeah, that really sort of highlighted that there was interest in my ideas as a, as a creator. And I thought, okay, let's give it a go. With the money that I generated from Piece of My Mind, I thought, okay, let's set up MindFX. And originally, it was just going to be a company set up as an outlet to actually create and release my own ideas, but then sort of later developed into something a bit different, which was, because I was getting approached by other people who saw the books that I produced and they were asking me, who wrote your book? Who formatted your book? And I was like, I wrote it, I formatted it. And they're like, oh, could you do mine? And I'm like, yeah, okay, we'll do that. And okay, well, do you want to release it through MindFX? And, we did that, and I've done that for several people now. I mean, it did get to the point where I had so many people submitting ideas for me to release that I sort of really stopped concentrating on my own work. And again, it's important to sort of harken back to what I mentioned earlier. Because I had so many ideas, didn't necessarily mean that I felt those ideas were worthy of release.
Yeah.
So what I thought is, okay, if I release the book, then I can work on somebody else's book release, and in the interim, obviously polish these ideas, and then just sporadically release maybe one idea a year when I feel, okay, that's polished, that's workable, it's been tested enough. And as I say, and that worked fine. So I was using other people's book releases to, ultimately keep the business going, help them, and also afford me the time to work on my own ideas. But I got so busy, wrapped up with other people's ideas, that my stuff got shelved, and I'm really sort of trying to put the brakes on a little bit now. So I still have projects for other people to release and other book releases in the pipeline for other people, but I'm sort of trying to rewind a little bit just to clear a little bit of my own backlog, because I've got an abundance of things which I think are worthy of release, but just not yet had the time to release them.
Yeah, that's a very nice, like, rounded story. And obviously, as you mentioned there, obviously A Piece of My Mind's been very well received by the community, and obviously your thoughts on mentalism and magic have also been very well received. How does it feel knowing that your book is on a shelf alongside other greats and people are looking at it for reference and they're taking inspiration from that? How does that feel for you?
Yeah, it's very humbling, because like again, it's sort of it it's a bit sad to say, but like I've got to tell the truth. Like, I don't have any ego. I think anybody who's ever met me and speaks to me knows I haven't got an ego, because nobody should have an ego in the first place. But also, I think, like, me as a person, I don't rate what I do highly. Like, I just do what I do, and if people like it, that's great. So
Yeah.
I'm sort of really honored that people have invested A, the hard-earned cash into my material, and B, see any form of value in it. So, it is humbling, but also it's sort of refreshing at the same time to get feedback, because I get a lot of feedback, not for the routines that are in the book, but it's the principles. And that makes me smile more than anything else, because, yes, I've got material to release, but I think people who are reading my book are extracting the knowledge that I do want them to take. And it's the principles and the techniques, like, I've lost count of the amount of times people have emailed me, I've got this routine, can I use cups? can I use your cups technique, or can I
Yeah.
use like a springboard technique? And and they want to use these concepts, or they're talking about concepts and telling me how they're using those concepts in different ways, which is, yeah, like that to me is it's humbling. It's humbling to think that and to know that there's interest, and that people are running with these ideas and using them in their own way. So yeah.
Yeah, I've seen you on a lot of projects as of recent, as mentioned names partway through. They're like,
Mhm.
oh, this technique's a thought of Michael Murray's, which is,
Yeah,
yeah, is very cool to see.
but there's also like a flip side to it as well, because um I mean, we'll maybe talking about this later on, but like I create obviously these new techniques um to fulfill gaps in routine structure that I'm creating. So I'm creating a routine, and I want a method to achieve something, but rather than actually borrowing from something which is existing, I find myself more as a creator enjoying the creative process of thinking, okay, how, there must be another way to achieve the same thing. I mean, a lot of people, I'll not reference who this is to, but everybody who's into magic mentalism will know exactly what I'm referring to when I say the repeated ploy. It's a simple technique, a potent technique, which actually doesn't, the credit's actually misplaced for who gets credit for that. I believe it dates back to Senator Randall, but that's perhaps
Whole different
for
ball
another
game
story.
itself.
But like people can become too complacent when they, even as creators, and say, okay, well, I'll just use this because obviously it'll fit the gap. But for me, I get a lot of enjoyment from the actual creative process. So rather than taking something which already exists, I'd rather sit down and create something completely brand new. So again, it's nice that people are using my techniques, but I still think that there's a missing piece in the thought process, whereby they should be saying, "Oh, I see what he's doing with this. He's using this in place of this
Yeah.
repeated ploy." And in my mind, I'm thinking, "Okay, look, I've showed you that there is another way to do this. There is another way to achieve the same outcome." And I'd like other
Yeah.
people to explore like fresh approaches themselves. So just use what I've done as inspiration rather than using it directly.
Yeah, I think that's another industry gripe, is laziness of magicians taking stuff as it is and
Hmm.
performing it to the T, to the method, sometimes to the scripting and mannerisms, as we mentioned earlier with
Hmm.
the likes of Darren. I think being able to take something and rework it in your own nature to fit how you work and how your brain thinks, and sort of the ability level maybe that you have, is definitely the best way to go about it. Because at the end of the day, as you mentioned there, sometimes the methods that are put into place for these plots and ploys aren't necessarily the fastest or easiest way to get about it. Sometimes they're super convoluted, sometimes they're incredibly difficult, and there are other ways and other methods for getting to that exact same place
Yeah.
that just need that little bit more thought
Yeah,
than a lot
yeah,
of people like to
and,
put in.
and don't get me wrong, I'm as guilty as the next man. Some of the techniques that I've created myself are like probably like the well, one in particular, which is unreleased ideas, is probably like the most complex thing that I've ever created in my life, and I don't necessarily know whether that's a good thing, which is like partially why it hasn't been released as yet. It does its job, and it does its job very well, but I don't know, like I've really got to sort of try and rein myself in, and sort of look at it from a back seat and sort of think, am I just enamored with this because of the method itself, um or like from a practical sense, is the method better than the effect? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So you do have to sort of rein yourself in. So you can go too far the other way. You can try to create yourself to fulfill something, but then end up with something that perhaps isn't right for the job. So it's a fine balance, but it's an enjoyable one. It's all
Oh,
part of the creative
100%.
process. So
Again, it comes back to that same thing we mentioned earlier with the likes of Ben and Azzy, using simple things and taking it back to the bare bones structure of like
yeah. Mhm.
things not having to be super complicated.
Yeah,
As you
and
mentioned
again,
there,
that's it. I mean, because obviously it's I'm not saying anything that people don't know or haven't heard already, but
yeah,
the audience, they don't care about the method, so the method's, relevant in their eyes. So, go the direct. If there is a very direct route, then take that
Run with
direct
it.
route. To take the easy option. If there isn't that direct route, then something more complex has to
Yeah.
take place.
And again, those options then allow for you to do more with the story and do more with the interaction that you're having with the person, because you're not worried about having to
Yes.
perform these knuckle busting sleights or doing this mental arithmetic to get to where you need to be.
Yeah.
It allows you to really like get
Exactly
involved.
right. Exactly right. Because there's some of the techniques that I've devised myself and use, but if I'm out, socially and enjoying a whiskey or two, then I'll not use them myself because they rely too much on
Yep.
this.
That's fair. That's happened one too many times at the likes of Blackpool.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you mentioned there, like magic serves an incredible purpose to create a connection between people, and obviously method isn't what people are looking at. When a layperson watches something, they don't think, oh, I saw that thing happening, or like I know how that was done. They're thinking, wow, that was incredible and it conveyed this emotion, and that's what they remember. They remember how it made them feel. What, in your opinion, is the purpose of magic and mentalism? I know that's a very profound, like, open question,
It
but
is. It is. It's it. The honest answer is it's no singular thing, because when you consider magic and mentalism, they're pretty much just at opposite ends of the same spectrum. They're all the same thing, really, from children's performances through to spiritualist medium stuff. It's all part of the same spectrum, and it's really all based on obviously comfort level. So you've got obviously the fraudulent spiritualist mediums who go out and they're fleecing people for the hard-earned cash, unless they're shut eyes and they're just doing this without being consciously aware. But you've got obviously charlatans on one end of the polar end of the spectrum, who are purposely using it to deceive people and to get money from them. And then obviously on the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got sort of magic, where magic is, in my eyes, more of a form of entertainment. So it is basically like almost like a social distraction. People want to use magic to entertain people, to sort of take them away from the thinking, because everybody's got their own problems and concerns and worries, and just being able to watch something that allows you just to to cast all those worries to one side and just enjoy what's been presented in front of you is a valid purpose. And if you look at children's magic, that's exactly what it is. It's a form of entertainment.
yeah,
That's why if you in the old yellow pages, you would look under entertainers and you find magicians. Mentalism is probably it's within the same spectrum, because obviously you've got the children's entertainers, you've got the magicians, and then you've got obviously on the opposite end of the spectrum you've got the fraudulent mediums. Mentalism hangs somewhere in between there, because we haven't got the kahunas to basically say we can genuinely read minds. I mean, I never say that I can read minds anyway. I say that I can read thoughts, because I genuinely believe it's possible to read thoughts, not minds. So basically, it's almost sort of, it's like a halfway point. We haven't got the kahunas to come out and say we're the real deal.
yeah,
But at the same time, we want to be treated like we have got some sort of, I suppose, superhuman ability. And there is that very much that ego stroking, I think, and apologies to the mentalism community, but it really is a lot of mentalists out there want people to believe that they've got this superhuman ability. They want to be a superhero, essentially.
yeah,
um but again, I'd like to believe the sort of way that I present, which was, again, as we mentioned earlier, inspired by Darren, is something a little bit different. And I'd like to think that what it is that I do is more inspirational. Um, and I'm not saying like inspirational as I'm an inspiring person, but take, for example, my effect, The Solution, which is The Spectator Solves the Cube, which I was very honored, that was performed on TV. It's been performed on TV all over the world. And that really is, it's a routine that is focused around a metaphor. And I like, really, with a lot of the effects that I create, to have this underlying metaphor built into the scripting of the effect, whether it's obvious to the audience or not. But that effect really helps to highlight, if you put your mind to something, then you can achieve it. So it's basically it's an illustration of the message. I ask an audience member, hands up, who feels it would be impossible for you to solve the cube, and obviously we get a volunteer up. And then I mentioned the Napoleon Hill quote, whatever the mind can conceive and believe we can achieve. But I also, and this is genuinely true, I believe in that, but also believe that the flip opposite is also true. So the very moment we let a seed of doubt enter our mind, then that doubt will manifest itself as our reality. So long as we tell ourselves that something will be impossible for us to do, like learn another language, to be able to run a marathon or whatever it may be, then that will always be the case. So we need to learn to change our mindset. And if we start sort of rewiring our brain or thinking differently and start thinking it may be possible, let's give it a go and find out, then all of a sudden you're not ruling out the possibility, you're entertaining the idea that something might be possible. And then as a direct result of changing that way of thinking, we can then revert back to Napoleon Hill's quote, the original one, whatever the mind can conceive and believe we can achieve. So if it conceives that something may be possible, then it just very well may be. And, and that's sort of the underlying message. And I actually used the quote as part of the performance. But again, that's what I'm wanting to do with that. Somebody comes up and they claim it's impossible for them to solve the cube, and then I get them to change their mindset, and they openly say to everybody, yeah, I think it would be possible for us to solve the cube now. And then when they bring it out and it's solved. So it's really all about the message.
Yeah.
And I think, that's, it's inspiring, or that's what I like to believe, that it's, my mentalism is inspiring people. So that is, so entertainment for magic, skullduggery for the for the charlatans who fleece people out of money and are consciously aware of that fact, and then mentalism for me is more more just to inspire people.
Yeah, I think it's nice to take that approach and pull it into the likes of magic, because I think, as you mentioned there, obviously the solution is more of a magic trick than necessarily like a mentalism piece. But to be able to take people's thoughts and emotions and connections between people, I think that's some of the strongest magic that you can create, is connections between people and memories and experiences, which at the crux of it, that's what magic does. It creates experiences between people and it creates memories. And
Yeah.
I think if people take that approach and run with it, as opposed to being like, I'm doing this out of this world for the sake of it being out of this world, as opposed to like the meaning and the conveying behind it. Like at the minute, I'm reading Absolute Magic by Darren Brown,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that's
Great book.
like throughout. That is one of the things that Darren keeps punching, is just like the connection, the story, and how people interact is far more important than the effect itself.
Yeah, bridging the connection. There's also another sort of side of it as well, because there's although this has never been released, I did start, because again, I like the use of quotes, because the sort of summarizing the key points that I want people to take away. But there is also this need to have mystery in our lives. That's why people, that they're so enamored with the unknown, like, as the aliens on other planets, and does Bigfoot exist, is the Loch Ness, and people like the mystery, and because once like a mystery solved, then it ceases to have the appeal, because we now have all of the answers. And I think it's important for people to recognize that in life we don't have all of the answers, because obviously that allows us not to relax, but instead to like continue, if that makes any sense. Because obviously if we've got all of the answers, if we believe in our head that we've got the answers to everything, that we know everything, then we don't continue searching. But just by having those unanswered questions, it really inspires us to search for answers. It gives us something to focus on. So I think it was Albert Einstein who once very famously suggested that one of the greatest things that we can experience in life is mystery. And I believe the quote sort of ends by saying something like, life without mystery, if you haven't got mystery in your life, then you may more or less may as well be dead. It's something, I can't remember the specifics, but I remember using that as a basis for an introduction to an effect, which really summarized that point. So I say Albert Einstein once famously suggested that one of the most important things that we can experience in life is mystery. And when we're young, that's very easy for us to do because we find mystery in everything, and we find mystery everywhere. We're fascinated by the raindrops that fall from the skies. We're enchanted by the pretty colors that appear as the rain subsides, and then we marvel at our own shadows as they follow our each and every turn. And think back to when you were a child, you did marvel over those
Yeah.
things. You loved looking at the rainbows. All the kids in cars, when there's a rainbow out there, how many parents, the mothers, fathers, oh, look at the rainbow, look at the rainbow. And
I
it's,
still do the same thing
it's,
now.
yeah, it's like, it's a fascinating thing. And then we do chase our shadows, on the school ground when it's a sunny day and we're younger. I bet you can remember doing that yourself. It's this Peter Pan type scenario. But obviously, as we grow older and we learn more about the world, we box up those things as the experiences and we give them labels. The more that we understand how a rainbow is formed. We understand what a rain cloud is. We understand how shadows are formed. And all of a sudden, the mystery that we had as a child or as children is gone. So that is really something that we always constantly strive to recapture. And I think, magic and mentalism, and even perhaps obviously this, the psychic nature, all also serve an important point to remind us that we don't know everything, that there is, that there is mystery, there are things that we don't understand, and it sort of allows us to rekindle that magic that we had as a child that otherwise may not be possible.
Yeah, it's that innate curiosity that we have that, like, even now as I've gone later into life, obviously I'm not old per se, but getting there. It's having that curiosity, even the likes of just, walking along the coastal front. Like, I live next to the beach, so just taking in the surroundings for what it is and not just allowing yourself to be blank and mindless to what's going on around you
Yeah.
is so nice. Like, just being curious and being open to discovery and learning, like, it's just a constant adventure as opposed to just
Yeah.
sitting down for the ride.
Yeah, and looking for it as well, like I really enjoy, obviously I've got a place there by the coast, and I like nothing more than looking up at the stars, when
Yeah.
it's clear, and and I've seen a comet literally fly past us. I thought it was a firework at first, but yeah, and it landed actually in the field. I never actually found it. But I don't know, radiation or whatever. If I had been, I would probably maybe had 12 tools or something by now. But yeah, in that it was, it was a magical experience. But you've got to look up at the skies. You've got to be consciously aware, and and look for these things. So yeah.
Yeah, I think obviously curiosity plays a huge part in the creative process, and you are one of the most creative thinkers that I know in the magic industry. Hence why, if I ever need help with anything, one, you've got a lot of knowledge of like books and methodology and things like that. But even just the creative aspect, if I come to you with a problem, 9 times out of 10, like a day later, you're like, here's a solution. And I just think, how did you get to that point from what I gave you? Because there's no direct route. So what is your creative process, and how do your hobbies outside of magic sort of help you form that creative process?
Well, I was very much inspired by Mark Elsden in that regard, because like, to me, when I was sort of first getting into the creative process, and I'd just released, I believe, Beyond ESP, and then Between the Lines was the second thing that I released. And I spoke to Mark Elsden, being the most prolific creator that I knew. I asked him. I said, "How do you create, and what's where do you get your inspiration from for your creativity?" And Mark gave me probably two of the most valuable pieces of advice that I've ever received in my life. And basically, he said, "Read as much as you can, watch as much as you can, and learn as much as you can about everything and anything, because obviously we can draw knowledge from outside of magic. A lot of people tend to be, or a lot of sort of creators tend to be more focused, inwards on, what's already been released, and they draw the inspirations from there rather than looking at the bigger picture. The other thing that Mark said to me was, take up puzzling. And he said it doesn't matter what type of puzzles that you're into. He says, but basically, if you take an interesting puzzle and start, literally solving puzzles, he says you'll find it, easier to create. And there is actually scientific proof to support that. So puzzling is my outside, I suppose, inspiration, or like it's a way to sort of help kickstart my creativity, because I think there was sort of an important document that was written that in trying to solve a puzzle, it opens up your neural pathways, which basically in turn, I don't know, there's all sorts of technical jargon, but if you research puzzling and creativity, it's categorically proven that it can open up certain parts of the brain, which obviously in turn obviously help that creative process. Because obviously when you think about it, when you consider puzzling, there's a lot that you can derive from it. You've got like logic puzzles, which cause you to think outside the box. Like a lot of these sort of Mensa puzzles and sort of questions that you get. The answers basically, they're very non-linear. So when if you solve them yourself, great, you're accredited for a high IQ. But even the not known and then obviously being provided the answer shows you that there's a completely different way of thinking about things. Also, the Rubik Cube, which we mentioned earlier, is probably the ideal analogy for it, because with the Rubik Cube, we start off with this end goal. We know how something should look at the end. So obviously when we're creating an idea or a concept for a routine, we tend to start off with, okay, this is what I want to achieve. So that's our end goal. We know what it should look like in respect of the cube. We know that all 6 sides need to be matching in color. And then what we need to do is we need to take incremental steps to work towards that goal. And the beauty is, and the reason why the Rubik Cube is a perfect analogy for this is because, there's almost an infinite amount of ways that we can actually solve the cube. It's not just one direct route. Yes, there is a very direct route that we can go, but there's a multitude of different approaches, and we can start making progress on a routine and creating something, and then obviously realize, okay, we're not getting anywhere, so we backtrack and then sort of kickstart again. And obviously, the more that you sort of learn about any subject, the more resources that you have to draw from, the more accurately you can then take a direct route. So again, obviously back to the Rubik Cube, we all know, I think I don't know how many moves it is, but it's sort of like 16 moves or less where every cube can be solved. So there is this optimum solution. So what we need to do when we're creating routines is strive for that optimum solution. Don't just accept it for what it is. So if we create a routine or we learn a routine from a book, don't just accept it as is. Just look at it. Okay, can we streamline that in any way? So there's sort of there's two ways that I can create, and one of them is actually thinking about it in terms of a puzzle and starting off with the end goal. The other thing which I do, which is sort of similar, which I think is more of a piece of advice that people can resonate with, is take inspiration from existing work. So we've all got that bottom drawer which is filled with stuff that we've bought, and we'll look at it and we think that's
Right
no
there.
good. Yeah. Is that all my products? Is it? I'll have Beyond the ASP.
I got this one, got these
exactly,
ones.
Exactly. But we've all got a storage place in our house which is basically filled with stuff that we'll never use. But what you've got to think about, and what I strongly suggest, is that you purchase those items for a reason, because you watched the video trailer for it, or you read the ad copy for it, and then in your mind you painted that end goal. You knew how this thing should look, and what it is, or the only reason why you're not using these things or you're not admiring them is because the methodology for those routines doesn't suit you personally. But therein lies something, because you've already got that end goal. You didn't have to create that yourself. That was already created for you. So you've already got the end goal. Now all you need to do is basically pull the resources and draw on the knowledge that you've already got to recreate a brand new method for achieving that end goal. So it's not wasted money, because a lot of people say to me, well, I can't just think up an idea like a spectator solves the cube. Well, you don't necessarily have to do that. People are creative in different ways. You don't have to create the end goal yourself. You can just draw on something which is already existing and just create a new method for yourself. So yeah, and then obviously other times, as I say, I just sort of examine like sort of key aspects to routines, and rather than just use them as is, I say, okay, like maybe equivocate, or I don't know, Trying to think of some examples, but like sort of any key point of any routine, I don't want to. I don't want to just use it. I don't want to just borrow it from somebody else and then just pop it in, because that, there's no fun in the creative process for me in doing that, because somebody else has done that creative process. So I just think, okay, like how would I approach that? That's just one possible route. That's one extra turn of the cube to get to the right
Yeah.
direction. But there's got to be another one. So I like to just think of alternative approaches. So in that respect, what I do is I create a lot of tools rather than routines. I've probably created more tools than routines, and and those tools are basically ultimately sitting in the wings. So in future when I'm creating routines, I've already got the tools to draw from. I've also got this sort of system that I call the Lego system in my mind, and that is, if you know, like maybe, I don't know, 10 different ways to force a playing card, and then maybe 10 different ways to control a card. Then imagine each of those techniques as a separate Lego brick. You take, the first way to force a card, and the first way to force a card, and then the first way to control a card. Piece them together. You try it that way, see how it works, and then basically, and then you move to the next one. So stick with that same control, but move to the next force, and then the next one, and you find basically what works best, and then you work through every permutation. So basically, ultimately, you've got what is it, 10 times 10? So it's like 100 different permutations to create the first two stages of any given routine. So basically, make a note and list all of the tools that you know, and all of the techniques, and all of the sleights, and what they're capable of doing. Therefore, you've got basically an index of ideas that you can actually draw from to create any routine. So what do I want to do? I want somebody to think of a card, and I want it to appear in my shoe. And then you basically look through, okay, what techniques will work, and now start piecing all of those things together in different ways, and then you find your own optimal solutions to them. And again, it's fun to do that.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. I think people need to take the time to sit and go through and figure out what works for them and how they can adapt it to their own. Because using that same Rubik's Cube analogy, if you were to just take the stickers from another Rubik's Cube and put them on this one so it looks solved, have you actually solved the cube, or do
Mhm.
you just have a multitude of methods that you've put together to create something that
Yeah.
isn't actually yours in the end?
But you've mentioned a very important point there, because one of the other things as well, and that is the most vital thing of all, is you've got to give yourself the opportunity to create. You've got to
Yeah,
free up time to create. Now I do the vast majority of my creating late at night, so when the kids are asleep, then I can afford. I don't have to think about them. I can just think about myself. You
yeah.
know,
It's
and it's
finding those little bits of time. Chris Rawlins recently said in one of his interviews that when he's up feeding his child, he'll sit and read a book, and he'll
mhm,
utilize that time to think and create. And I think finding those little tidbits of time in your day is massive. Even just carrying a notepad and writing ideas down as you go and flicking
yeah.
back to it.
Mhm,
I know
mhm,
Blake Voigt a while ago said one of his sort of creative workshopping things is to write down just 10 ideas. You'll take a plot and an item and you'll mash them together and you'll create a few ideas. And obviously 10 by 365, you've got a lot of ideas there if you're doing 10 a day. And
mhm,
even if there's one or two or three of those things that are absolute gems, you're golden for
mhm.
what might take 10-15 minutes to brainstorm in the morning when you're
Yeah,
normally
definitely.
scrolling
Mhm.
TikTok. Like,
Yeah, well, that's it as well. Obviously, social media does. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, I haven't got the time to do that." And I recently took the liberty of like deleting Facebook. So, like, obviously the account's still open, but like I purposely delete the app off my phone, and then basically maybe like once a week or so I'll go back on, and then just basically check through maybe the groups that I'm a member of, to see if there's any updates there. But I purposely try to avoid the scrolling, because
yeah,
once you start scrolling, that's it.
dangerous.
Like 2-3 hours is wasted. And I've started trying to make better use of that time, and it's amazing just how much time's being absorbed by that. So like when before you go on to social media or any social media site, it's important to have in your mind, I mean, this is just like I suppose a little piece of advice for life. Have in your mind what you want to achieve out of that time.
Yeah,
So either A, have a goal, okay, I'm going on to check this forum to see if there's an answer to this question, once you've got that answer, come off.
Get out. Yep.
You know, if you just want to go on and just have a look, that's fine. But in your mind, say, okay, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes. I'm going to give myself 20 minutes. I'm going to give myself an hour, whatever it may be, and set an alarm on your phone, and then go through when it believes, get the habit of stopping. And like I started recently exercising again, and I always thought, okay, I've not got enough time in my life to exercise, but you know, coming off social media has just really showed me just how much time I actually wasted on there. So now, you know, during the week I do like at least an hour a day, and I feel better for it mentally, physically, you know. But again, you know, if people say I haven't got time to, you know, I haven't got time to create, then I'll tell you what, just try deleting that Facebook app.
Yeah.
You know,
I
and
think
honestly, you'll be surprised. And the amount of times when I first did, I deleted off, put the phone in my pocket, and I frightened myself the amount of times I reached in my pocket and brought my phone out. Now, and I was thinking, why have I brought my phone out? I thought, I know what I was going to do. I was going to check Facebook.
Yeah.
And then I put the phone back in my pocket. And then I must have done that about 30 times during the day. I'd just be walking along and I'd find the phone in my hand. I'd be going, yeah, I don't know, maybe taking the dogs for a walk or something. I'd reach in at my phone. All of a sudden, my phone's in my hand. And I'm like, what's my phone? I was going to check Facebook. And it really frightens you to begin with. It really is an eye-opening experience. But yeah, you know, try that, and you'll free up the time to think about a plot to create, and yeah, and also
Yeah.
it has to be fun as well. You know, you do have to enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, then you know you're not going to
What's the
get
point?
anywhere with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably, obviously, as you know, I've been on a weight loss journey myself, and that's one of the
You're
key
doing very well.
things was the sort of I don't have the time mentality, which applies to a lot of aspects in life. But one thing I think that the iPhone especially does is having that screen time thing
Yeah.
where you can go on and you can see exactly what you've been doing. You can see exactly how much time you spent on there. And I mean, I know my iPhone gives us a weekly update that says you've been on for X amount of time on average last week, which
Hmm.
looking at it is absolutely terrifying. And I think,
Yeah.
as you mentioned there, trialing a day where you just either take all the stuff off your phone, or if you've got another device like an iPod or something like that, if you need it for, like, you know, work emails or music or something like that that you can use, you'll sharp notice how much time you gain when you
Hmm.
lose those different distractions, and it makes a massive difference.
Yeah. Without a shadow of a doubt.
Obviously, we've discussed a lot of your creative process there and how you get to these ideas. You've come up with a multitude of ideas, and as you say, you don't like to put everything out that you've ever thought about. You refine it and you tune it and it put out the best version of itself. Even some of the stuff that you put out that you don't necessarily think is the best version of itself, you still on go and you create like Facebook groups, and you're constantly rolling with these ideas and making them bigger than they are. Do you have a project or an effect in particular that you are most proud of?
Um.
Or is it something that's unreleased or something ongoing?
Yeah. I mean, I'm proud of everything that I've created for different reasons. I mean, sort of the probably the primary release that I am most proud of, I suppose, at the moment would probably be probably be the solution. Again, like for me, when I release something, you know, I don't release it because I just want to make money from it.
Yeah.
I tend to come up with the idea, and then, you know, when I show people, when I start showing friends, and friends are like, "Oh, have you got that for sale?" And you know, when you've got numerous people saying, "Oh, can I buy that? Can I buy that? Can I
Yeah.
buy that?" You know, I'd be fool to turn down the money. Yes,
Yeah, of course.
but you know, I appreciate that I've got something that people feel worthy of investing in. Um, and the fact that that one is probably one of the most performed routines on TV, really, I think sort of helps to elevate that. I mean, when I created it, Stephen Brundage got in touch, and he's like, I've got a TV spot. I want to use this on the TV spot. Can I do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no problem." And then obviously, Maddox, Sam Dixon, he performed it on Britain's Got Talent. And again, that was like a huge honor for me because, like, you know, like from my parents' perspective, you know, my parents obviously know what it is that I do for a living, and I don't push myself out there. I don't, you know, as I say, I consider myself more of a creator than a performer. And yes, I do perform, and I perform a lot more socially than in like a professional capacity. But like I remember with that particular one, my mum and dad were on a cruise, and I'd mentioned, oh, it's going to be performed tonight, so that they'd found some bar where Britain's Got Talent was on, and obviously there was Maddox obviously performing my routine, and my mum and dad were like proud as punch, and they had spoke to somebody that was standing next to them, and my mum sort of tapping them. My son created that, and it was really eye opening because the general public don't think of that. Like they
Yeah.
don't think, okay, there's somebody who's created the idea, and then obviously that's been passed on, and then obviously you've got somebody performing something. They just assume that whoever performs something, it's sort of their
Is
idea.
their thing. Yeah.
It's their thing. It's their skill, like juggling.
Yeah.
Somebody learns to juggle, it's all them. They don't realize that that there are other people who are involved in the process. So and these people just looked at my parents like they were weird, and I said, look, ma'am, you don't even need to talk about that. But yeah, just obviously coming back, so just a little bit of an accolade, because obviously my parents did wonder at one point whether I was wasting my life, getting
All
involved
parents do.
in
Yeah.
fiddling on with cards and things, and they wondered, this isn't a living that anybody can sustain themselves doing.
When you're
But
getting a real job, like
yeah,
that age-old question.
but just to be able to sort of see that, and for my parents to be able to see that, that's as proud, probably one of the first times in my life where I've sort of really felt proud of something. Yeah, so it has to be that. The next one that I'm very, very proud of is something which hasn't been released yet. And this is basically a concept. I'm not going to go too much into it, but I'll explain why I was so proud of it. I actually ran this problem by a chatbot. I went on to
Okay.
like the AI platforms to help me to create something. Like I had the method, so I like stipulated exactly what was needed. And I had also a friend who's basically, he's really into AI, and he's on like a higher tier, like paid thing. So basically, he's got like the top level version of AI to help obviously problem solve. And together we pitted all of the information against AI, and AI came back and said, what you're asking for is impossible. And that's like,
Love that.
I know for a fact it's not, and I've made it possible.
Yeah.
So
That's really
just the
cool.
fact that I mean, obviously, read from that what you will, but it's like it's sort of, it's me versus technology, and I'm like, no, I'm not being told that something's impossible. The very fact that it says it's impossible, I'm gonna persevere. And it's, yeah, again, this actually harkens back to what I was talking about before, because it was the same thing. I don't actually still know whether the method for this is better than what the effect will
Yeah.
be. But I do know for 100% certain it's one of the cleverest things that I've ever came up with. So I'm really enamored, and will continue sort of pursuing it. It's not difficult. It's not difficult, but ultimately, yeah, it's something which I'm proud of. But yes, still in development.
Very excited to see that come into fruition. If AI thinks that it's not possible, then it's going to be good. Which takes us perfectly actually onto, obviously, mentalism especially has changed a lot in the past like few years. Um, Obviously, I don't want to border into methodology and specifics here, but there's conventional ways of doing things and there's the new age ways of doing things.
Yeah.
Where do you think that new age has its place in mentalism? Do you think it's something that might potentially take over the methodology side of things, or is it something that you think should be used as a tool to
No,
assist
I
in
think,
methods?
yeah, I think like anything else, it is just simply a tool, because ultimately, the new age approach is often just a very simplistic approach to, it does its job, it does its job very well, but again, on its own, without any creative thinking, it very much falls flat. So what has been made possible by it is phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, and it's something which I do follow, and it's something which I'm invested in personally. Um, but on its own, without a level of creative thought to go alongside it, I think it's being like very badly abused, or certainly not being used in the right way. And again, I'm not sitting here lauding it, saying I've got all of the answers here. because I've used obviously the new age approaches in the most direct way possible, but you know I still myself don't think it's the right way to use them. So I like to explore. I like to use those as part of other routines. So it's got to be like one small method as part of like a bigger structured routine. You need to layer it. You need to take inspiration from Bob Cassidy. And I've got this sort of concept that I call circle of truth for people being able to ultimately figure out what it is that's actually going on. So yes, obviously, whereas obviously new age approaches are sort of on the rise, and that there's some sort of fantastic work that's been done in that regard. I'm quite happy that there's also the exact opposite, and there are like quite a few dedicated performers who are concentrating exclusively on going the exact opposite way.
Yeah.
Obviously, Pete Turner's obviously worthy of mention. You've got obviously Fraser Parker, who loves his sort of propless approach, and myself, as I say, whereas I do use new age approaches, the entirely propless approach is just something which just resonates to me, because obviously I've got to rely on the tools which I've got. I mean, the end goal, or the ideal goal, would just be we can just walk ourselves anywhere, and we're ready to perform. And also, I think in that regard, the techniques that we're developing now on the propless front are far better than they've ever been in the past. And I'd like to think, if I am to give myself a credit in any place within magic or mentalism, I'd say I'd like to, you know, I do acknowledge that I'm a small part of that, because obviously I've paved the way with sort of my tombola, with the cups, and and springboard, all of these sort of concepts. I think or sort of help and show others that, as I say, that there are other routes,
Yeah.
that
I think it's invited a sort of friendly competition in that obviously as the new age evolves and as these things become easier, it then makes people think on the conventional approach, like maybe there's other ways that we can go about this that are easier or more simplistic or better ways of doing things. And it creates that nice back and forth to potentially come up with some ridiculous things that people have never thought about before. And as you
yeah.
mentioned there, obviously you have the limitations of the new age of, location and things like that. Signal being a massive thing, is obviously one of the
Got no
things.
idea what
And
you're
then it falls back on, right, I need to get out of this. I'm going to go with, billets. I'm going to
Yeah,
go back
yeah,
to those conventional things. So
yeah.
it's whether it's there to be used as an alternative, or as you say, I think it's more suited as a sort of tool that we can use
Yeah.
as and when's appropriate.
And again, there's there's some very notable performers. One of them in particular is my good friend Steve Cook, and again, he's like, some of the principles and ideas that he's created are superb, because again, he's sort of very direct in obviously his methodology. So he will use very conventional methods, and existing methods to achieve the routines that he creates. But again, his choice for using those particular methods is all sound, and it's all reason. So he does create principles and ideas, but in, I suppose, in almost like a happy medium way, because I don't think it's not right to say that any one of those is better than the other. I think they all play the part. I don't for one minute say that we should just go solely propless,
Yeah, of course.
or we should go solely new age. But I do think there's a happy medium. There's a happy medium to be found in. As I say, Steve Cook does a wonderful job of sort of borrowing some propless techniques, but again, that are like 100% reliable, very direct. Swindle. He had a routine called Swindle, which again,
Fantastic.
is just beautiful. Just the level of thought that's went into it. And again, I mentioned him before, Gabriel Valen. The material that he's putting out, you know, a lot of people sort of shy away from the proper stuff because it's not reliable. It's got room for failure. But when you sort of following the current trend of thought on in the ground that's been paved by the likes of Gabrielle, it's really good because obviously the methods are reliable. Just as reliable as anything else. If you hand somebody a pack of cards, they could,
Drop them.
they could be dropped on the floor.
Yeah.
That there is always a margin for error anywhere. But they're all safeguarded against. So yeah, so there's no. I don't think any one will win. Both will continue in their own right, and I think it's those that actually find the happy ground in the middle are probably the wisest. They can dip their toes in
Yeah.
either direction, but again, you just got to be selective over what you use, and how you use it. I think it's got to be purposeful. You've got to choose the right tool for the right job, not just because you're lazy, because that'll do
Yeah,
it.
the easiest tool for this right job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you got to ask yourself, again, I completely understand. You don't want to, if you want to harvest a piece of information that somebody's thinking of a name, then yes, there are sort of mechanical means, and there's but New Age might provide obviously a more direct route, but again, on its own, you're just using it as is a bad idea. It needs to be, you know. You need to read Design and Miracles. You need to read these other books to understand how to use these things wisely. And that is the big problem. I don't think there's enough resources out there on how to use these things properly.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that I use them properly, but I am exploring different ways to use them. And again, that's just something that I enjoy from a creative point of view. But but there's, I think, for the future is not in really, I suppose, advancing either, but really sort of contemplating, how we structure routines, actually using what's already there.
Yeah, again, they're instruments and tools to be utilized and to be
Mm-hmm.
drawn from. And it should be, as you mentioned, like an inspiration and a thought-provoking thing. Again, we come back to curiosity. It should be something that you go, okay, there's this approach and there's also this old school approach. Is there something in the middle? Is there something we
Yeah.
can utilize to like bring these two things together to create something impossible? Because at the end of the day, that's the end goal.
Yeah, you've got to. I suppose it boils down to the fact you've got to understand why you're using what you're using. So if you think about, okay, I'm using this, you've got to ask yourself, okay, why am I using it? Is it because I'm lazy, or is it because or is that like the best way to do what's necessary? Again, I see some fantastic performers. Even Gabrielle does this routine, which is absolutely mind blowing. And then I asked him how he did it, and it literally took him 2 years to learn. And you had to store thousands of pieces of information in his mind, and it's
Yeah.
like you see the end results, and it's like it's
So
incredible. But
streamlined and
it's sort of dedication. But again, that what he does is like is the equivalent to a new age style routine, but he's went old school. But again, it's dedication. So the key point here is he hasn't been lazy. He's like, okay, he's thought, okay, what is the best way to do this? The best way isn't the easiest way. And again, that's something, sometimes it is the best way is the easiest way. In that instance, it isn't. Because he can do it anytime, any place, anywhere he's at, he can perform this routine. But
it's very much the opposite of laziness, which I think again
yeah.
is, as you mentioned before, Pete Turner, and a testament to the stuff that he's created. Some of that stuff, obviously, there's a lot of work goes into it. Sometimes a lot of like memorization and things like that. But if you are willing to put in that work, it is a surefire, hard hitting, as close to bare bones mentalism you can get.
And again, Pete's obviously, I missed him out of my list of inspirations. Pete's very much an inspiration. I don't, and I've told him I wouldn't say anything out of school, but not all of his methods are like. But I do like his routines, his presentations. So again, I take those and I say, okay, I love that presentation. I love the concept of that routine. Not your method, but so I'm going to create a method for that routine. And when I released Tattletaled many years back, again, he very kindly allowed me to use the script because I thought the script's perfect. That doesn't need changing, but I wanted to change the method. And it's a beautiful routine.
Obviously, you've mentioned an absolute abundance of names, both people that have influenced you and people that are coming to light more recently. Are there any people that you think are currently shaping the future of mentalism? Are there any talents out there that you'd like to bring to light who maybe aren't getting the recognition that you think they deserve? Anybody that you'd like to
Um,
mention?
I think I think I've covered the main ones. I mean, as I say, Fernando Figueras is absolutely superb. Manuel Luarte,
Yeah,
I haven't mentioned him yet, and
phenomenal.
he is brilliant. He fooled me so badly when I first met him at Blackpool, and he actually fooled me with one of my own methods, which is is a key testament. But he's
Humbling
like,
experience.
yeah, he walks the walk, he talks the talk, and like he is like, in my opinion, like a real life mentalist. Like when you speak to him, everything that he says and everything that he doesn't break character. He's like I don't actually know the real Manuel Duarte, like because like he just does, and everything about him is invested in the character, and I believe it's a character. If it's him. If it's just the way he is, I don't know. Hats off to him, but yeah, Manuel Duarte definitely he's one to watch. Really admire his thinking. Um, Obviously, Gabriel Verlaine. I also like Jan Foster. He's another one. If you check out his Penguin lecture, that's very, very good. And again, he uses very direct approaches, but obviously
Yeah.
the presentations, the routines, uses obviously like again very old school methods, but in very new ways. As I say, Fernando Figueras. I'm just sort of considering really a lot of the people that when I organize minds, I tend to try to introduce new names that people perhaps
Yeah.
haven't heard of before. People who I think are worthy of listening to. But yeah, so I think one of the current ones would be Manuel Duarte. It's very talented.
Obviously, before we come into sort of closing thoughts, there's several questions that I still like to get to, but you just mentioned Minds there, which is obviously the convention which is centered around mentalism and obviously those kinds of dark art per se. How did that come about, and what was your thinking with that, and what is the future of Minds looking like?
Right. So okay. So it's basically started because I've got children. Um, well, first of all, many years back, I went to a mentalism convention in Germany. I think they called it Mind Summit. Rainer Mies, Thomas Hein Rainer Mies were two of the guys that had put that together, and it was very, very good. But because I had two very young children, sort of trying to take time away from them was problematic. So what I decided to do was to think, okay, I'm going to, how about trying to organize a convention myself? Because, throughout my involvement within mentalism, I've built up many friendships and many different connections. So I floated the idea, and I said to a bunch of people, I'm trying to remember them all. There was Ben Cardall, there was Atlas Brookins, there was Mark Elsden, Peter Turner, Colin McLeod, there was and Luke Jimmy, um, and I contacted them all and I said, "Would you be available on any of these dates?" And basically, they all came back and said, "Oh, they're all available," but it was on like one
Same day.
singular date. And I was like, okay. And I'd never organized an event before, so I didn't know how much. And I suppose these things are never really discussed openly. So this is a first for a public um, sort of interview. But I didn't know how much lecturers were. I didn't know what lecture fees, entailed. So I thought, okay, if I can get them all together on this one day, or a few of them, that was my original
Yeah.
idea, is to float the dates. And I thought maybe just a few of them, a couple of them can say they can do the date, and we'll go with the majority. And I didn't know what to offer fee wise, so I just emailed them all and I said, I'm not sure, how much you charge for your lectures, but would you do an hour lecture for £1,000? And basically, every one of them come back and they're like, "Yeah, I'll do an hour lecture for a thousand
Snapped
pounds."
it
They're
up.
like, "Right." So now basically, because I'd floated the dates, they'd confirmed the dates, and obviously everybody confirmed that they were happy with £1,000. I was sort of committed, really. I couldn't then say, "Oh, well, actually, it's not happening now." Um, and I thought, well, oh, I was a bit sort of shocked that everybody had come back and said yes. And I thought, well, if it goes ahead, and I only select a few of those people, and the other people will be, well, why didn't you
Why
get me?
didn't you
So,
get picked?
so
Yeah.
organized this event, threw myself into the mix, and there was a little bit of a selfish reason because I thought, I never put myself on the same stature as any of those performers, but I thought, okay, wouldn't it be nice someday if I could star alongside, some of who, the people who I respect most in the industry? And I thought there is one way to make that happen, and that's to
Bring them
organize
to
an event
you.
myself and put myself on the same lineup. So yeah, so that's exactly what I did. And as a result, I lost thousands of pounds. Um, well, it wasn't as bad as that. It was probably a couple of thousand I lost on the first one.
Steep
And
learning curve.
I reined the fee in a little bit for the second one. So apologies to anybody who's been paid a lecture fee recently that you didn't
I
get
didn't
that
get a
1,000.
grand.
It's yeah, I sort of wised up a little bit and started just asking people what will you charge in the fees, so we're far more reasonable. But actually, I have to say, credit to a lot of these guys. A lot of the guys have actually came back subsequently and actually lectured for me for free.
Yeah.
I've had multiple performers actually come back, and Pete and Luke and what have you. They're all yeah, they are friends. I mean, I did want to pay them regardless, but they have offered the services and have came back lectured for free. But and that's just for future lecturers. If you want
Take
to
note.
lecture for free, that's fine too.
Yeah, it's a
But yeah,
great reflection of their characters. So I
yeah, so,
mean,
so so it rolled on from there. So yeah, it was like a tremendous success, and I wanted everybody to stay together. So I think I organised something for like the day beforehand. I organised sort of discounts in the local bars and made sure food was provided. So everybody came together. So it was more of a community thing. So I was really focused on getting like-minded people together to to share their experiences. And I had a lot of talented performers and even TV sort of personalities as part of the delegate, um, as part of the group of delegates who were there. So there was
yeah,
actually probably just as much talent in the room on the seats. As delegates, as there was actually performing and lecturing for everybody. So that continued. I think we got to, I think the last one was Mines 8. And then because I had so much going on behind the scenes, I couldn't do it. So I've missed now. This will be the second year that we've missed. It was actually going to potentially take place this year, but by the time everything's got together behind the scenes, it's sort of a little bit last minute. And because we've missed a year, I do want the next one to be, right
yeah.
up there, as
I think with that starting lineup that you had as well, I think you're one of the very few people that come to mind that could come up with a lineup like that for their first event and just be like, yeah, this is how I'm starting. Like, how
yeah.
do you even progress from there? It's
Yeah,
crazy.
so it was difficult, but it was enjoyable because I'd been to the Mind Summit, and that was great because I seen some phenomenal performers that not many people had seen before. So like Jan Foster, I
Yeah,
don't know if he had ever lectured in the UK before. It might have been the first for him. Certainly, I'm not aware that he'd lectured in the UK before. So to bring obviously a lot of the European talent over, Florian Severin, who wrote the book What Lies Inside, an absolute
yeah,
hilarious guy and a phenomenal performer too. Like literally one of the best stage sort of mentalists, comedy stage mentalists I've seen. And yeah, to bring those names over is really good. So that's what I started to do, is to sort of, I thought, certainly within the UK, it's very difficult to increase the level of talent, and I've literally brought in the best. That there are still people to that can still lecture from within the UK that haven't been able to lecture in previous events. But I also like to sort of scout for fresh
yeah.
talent. So Manuel Luarte, I had him lecture, and he was very much a fresh face. Tar Mansour, and apologies if I've pronounced your surname wrong there, Tar. But and it was great. I think that might have been his first lecture in the UK. Obviously, Tiemann brought him over, brought his entire band over actually twice to do like a full sort of stage performance in the evenings, and treat us to two fantastic lectures. Um, so yeah, it's basically that there's a lot of talent out there, but a lot of talent that's sort of really, I suppose, a little bit more underground, where these people are known very much outside of the UK. Like you've got Harry Lucas, and he's
Yeah,
really,
sensational. Super nice guy as well.
yeah, I think from Austria. and like he's sort of really the equivalent of Darren over there.
Yeah.
Again, but and again, phenomenal. Such a nice guy as well. And obviously we had him in lecture, so yeah, it's just nice to introduce people. And what everybody says about Minds is it's all the lectures are great, but it's the community and the friendships that have been built, that make it so special. So
I think that's one thing that northern conventions in particular are doing really well. The likes of South Tyneside, I
mhm,
think both South Tyneside and Mines, the community aspect and it
yeah,
being so intimate and being able to rub shoulders with some of the greats and just sit down with people and talk and like really be able to get involved with that without it being like the likes of Blackpool where you are literally shoulder to shoulder with thousands of people.
yeah,
It's an incredible opportunity.
and that's it. I mean, obviously, that's another aspect to it because I've kept it limited, so it's like 100 delegates. And I think the last one was actually the very first one that we'd sold out on. But I really don't want to grow beyond that because then obviously, you start running the risk of, it turning into something, which could potentially be Blackpool. I mean, to be honest, I did entertain that thought and idea at one point in my mind to start off a convention with 100 people, then the next year 250, then 500, and then potentially, and I hate to say this, I'm probably going to be barred from Blackpool for saying this, but to potentially take on something like Blackpool, and then that could be literally my sole job. It would be to, obviously I would need help in hand, but to organize something. But it very very much came apparent after the first one that the one thing that people appreciated was the intimacy of it, the
Yeah.
fact that it wasn't big. And so, yes, it's never like a money spinner. So for anybody who ever contemplates running a convention, and that there are a few that are starting to, like say Chris Congreves, he's got a convention which was brilliant, by the way, Triple C, that is going to be held, I believe, 2 weeks time, 2 weeks today,
Mm.
which is phenomenal. But it's a lot of hard work, for a lot. For a very distinct sort of lack of reward. And every time on the run up to Mines when I organise it, I'm thinking in my mind, like I don't make money out of it, maybe £100, £200, and that's the God's
Yeah.
honest truth. That's basically all that I draw from it. Yes, obviously, it does keep MindFX name out there, so there is I can't put it through the books for that reason.
I mean,
That's
at the end of the day, you still have a business
promotion.
to run and operate.
Um,
So,
but yeah, it's it's the friendships that are basically created, and it's like it is very much like a family reunion. But yeah, there's no money in it, but and every time it gets like I organize it, I'm like, this is so much work, there's so much work, and then I'm thinking this is the last one, and then basically when I go and just meeting everybody and everybody's smiling, and
yeah.
everybody's having a good time, and you have the catch ups, and it's right on my doorstep, very easy for me. So I'm selfish rather than me going anywhere else. I'm getting
Bringing
people to
everyone to
come
you.
to me. So, yeah, it's very handy for me because the Northeast is very much out of the way, certainly for people who live down south. Yeah, for people from Scotland, probably a little bit easier, but for those at the bottom of the country that do travel a long way, and then have people come from the States and
Yeah.
Mexico and like everywhere all over the world, and they're putting some heavy cash in, just to be there in person. Australia, everywhere, and it's and I feel so proud because I remember actually, although this is sort of going slightly off topic, the very first one that I ever held was at a place called Neville Hall, and that is basically where the Newcastle Magic Circle had its headquarters. So when I was 16-year-old and went to the Newcastle Magic Circle for the very first time, I witnessed, Daryl, Michael Lamar, John Leclerc, like, some astounding performers um lecturing in front of me, and I'm sitting there like in absolute awe of these people who are in front of me. And I remember thinking to myself, how amazing would it be to have a job like that where, you're going across the world and you're lecturing in front of people. So the very first Minds, as I say, I put myself on the lecture lineup, not only to be sort of starring alongside all these great names, but also so that I could obviously share some of my ideas. And it was a very, very humbling experience. And Luke Jamay at the end, I'll never forget, sort of, he came down and then he got everybody to had like a sort of standing ovation, everybody sort of clapping. And I couldn't help but cry. I was like, I was really overcome with emotion, because I just remember being 16-year-old thinking, how amazing would that be? And then to find myself in that physical position was just, yeah, it was just unbelievable. So mines will be back. It has taken a break, but next year I'm going to plan to bring it back and make it the best yet. So yeah.
Very exciting stuff. Mine's 9, and then is there something special in the works for Mine's 10? Like, it's a big anniversary.
Well, I may try and twist certain arms to be part of it. I've slowly made friendships with the right people. So I am gearing up for one of my heroes. Surprise, surprise.
Read between the
Surprise,
lines
guessing
as
who
you
it
wish
might
there.
be. Which obviously I can't. I'm not dropping that as that's going to happen. I will try for that, but
Yeah.
as to whether it happens isn't in my hands. But that would be nice. But yeah, I do want something when it gets to the 10th one. Yeah, it's got to be something very special.
Big thing.
But yeah,
Obviously, you've mentioned not only are a lot of people utilizing your ideas and sort of collaborating on projects, you've obviously worked with a lot of people as well in terms of consultancy. Is there anything that you can touch on there? Anything that you've done that you'd like to sort of highlight and maybe people might not know about, or just a few fun little stories that you could tell?
Yeah, I mean, obviously my consultancy work is quite limited. I haven't got like a huge portfolio in that regard. But obviously I can say that I was a consultant for Dynamo. And that was basically on the Buried Alive. That was a tremendous experience. It's one of those things that was very humbling, because I like distinctly remember the call, because and what I can say is I turned Dynamo down twice. He did ask me to be a consultant twice. I was like, no, sorry, can't do that. But the third time it was a case of, okay, if I don't say yes now, then he'll probably never ask us again. So I was like, okay, go on then. You've twisted me arm, I'll go. But yeah, I went down. That was like such a brilliant experience. It's one of those experiences which I'll remember to the day I die. And it's like just being surrounded by people who like I admire so much in the industry. And then, ultimately, like, again, it was never about the money, because if he had asked me to pay to be a consultant for him, I would have happily paid to just for the experience. As that was the first time that I had sort of, I suppose, any major involvement in anything of that nature. And again, I was super proud. Obviously, Dynamo chose to perform the solution, and not only that, but also end the show prior to the Buried Alive segment with that. So, in my opinion, that was sort of, I'd like to think that all the routines were great, but to have that as the sort of pinnacle before he's stunned at the end was to me something special. And again, he's such a lovely guy as well, just so humble about his background, and probably got more right than anybody else to have an ego, because of just how far he's came, and and everything that he's overcome as well, so but he's not. He's like, I remember sitting down with him in a room that was just me and him, and he's like saying to us, Michael, he says I still sort of have to pinch myself each and every day. It's what I've got, and just really amazing. And then I can't go too much into detail for this, but another little bizarre story. I was watching Dr. Doolittle with the kids, and all of a sudden it was near the beginning, and there was a courtroom scene, and my phone started ringing, so I paused the TV, and it was and Andy Nyman was on there, because of course Andy Nyman, as you know, is part of Darren's team. And it just so happens, it was just a pure fluke. The moment I paused it, there's Andy Nyman. And then I said, oh, I know that guy. And then basically I looked down to see who was on the phone, and it was Andy Nyman on the phone. And I was like, you'll never believe it, that's that. And my kids just wouldn't have it. They're like, no. I was like, seriously, it is. So it went through. So yeah, Darren was working on a particular segment for the Showman Show, and as I say, I'll not go too much because I said I wouldn't really sort of
Yeah, of course.
discuss anything openly. But I had a particular knowledge of something that they had interest in to use as part of the show, and yeah, so it wasn't like I wasn't certainly I was not a fully fledged consultant on that show. As I say, but more sort of liaison on one particular element, which actually they didn't ultimately use what I was suggesting, which was perfectly fine. But just even to be considered as like a resource for involvement, and that was brilliant because again just one of my sort of heroes, I suppose, in the industry. So yeah, if Darren's listening to this, or if Andy's listening, and they want any more involvement from somebody, then and I'd like to volunteer myself, please. Yeah, no, but
And
that was brilliant.
Andy, Darren, if you are listening, he did say before if Dynamo asked to pay to consult, Michael is willing to pay as well to be
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
that.
I'll give them me lecture fee. Yeah, that I paid the other guys. But yeah, no, it's just really so nice. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of sort of little side projects that I've been involved with, and people who are on TV. Obviously, me sort of discussions that I had with sort of Maddox and David Penn and whatnot for Britain's Got Talent was great. So and sort of listening to the sort of structure and the way that worked, and then offering suggestions because I had obviously if Sam or if Maddox rather had went through the next stage. I had a specific routine which was designed for that. Unfortunately, didn't get it all the way through the finals. If he had have used my routine, then the next routine, he might have got there. Just saying, I'm just floating that out there. I'm just floating that out there. But yeah, and then that's unreleased. But again, it was just nice to to have sort of creative input into that, and to be able to think about I suppose like TV magic, and in the way that works. But yeah, it's something that I'd like to pursue in the future. If the opportunity arises, um, because obviously it does. It's a more focused, creative process. You're literally, you're in a building. Obviously, different performers will work in different ways. But yeah, you just obviously with a collective group of fantastic thinkers, and your mind's focused on achieving an objective, and it's just really fun. I mean, I
Yeah.
was asked to consult for, I can't say the name of the show because I would have to say a swear word, but there was um, uh, a French connection. Mind.
You can swear. You can
Uh,
swear. This
so
podcast allows that.
Mindfuck was the TV show, which I think it was Holland, where it's basically produced. Or certainly in Europe, and I was asked to do some consultation work for that. And actually, they sent me photographs of where I would be staying in this sort of like beautiful building, sort of in the countryside with sort of like thatched roof, and it looked amazing. And they listed all of the sort of performers that would be there. Unfortunately, I couldn't go again, just sort of with the family ties. So I have sort of, my kids have got a lot to blame, like I've been asked to go to many different places, but I haven't had the option to do that. So yeah, don't have kids. um,
Well, I mean, I was about to say, what's one piece of advice that you've learned? Obviously, over the years, you've obviously gained a lot of knowledge, you've given a lot of knowledge. But in part, what if you were to give one piece of advice that you'd like everybody to hear, other than don't have kids? What would your advice be?
um, take time out for yourself. Um, yeah, I would say that, and I'm not going to go too deep into the mental health situation, but I did have a discussion because one thing that not many people realize about me is I'm a qualified hypnotherapist, a therapeutic hypnotherapist. And I actually spoke to a guy, Dr. Mulhern. That's not Stephen Mulhern. It was a Dr. Mulhern, and he was one of the chief medical consultants over in London. Sadly, he passed away. But I was speaking to him about obviously the state of mental health, and he basically was talking about the fact that in the sort of like Far Eastern countries, the mental health um, of people in the Far East is a lot better than, like the UK, America, and that's down to a simple reason. A lot of people in the Eastern countries take time out of the day, whether it's like to relax, do yoga, to pray, to meditate, and do all of those things. But the key thing is that they take time out of their day where they're basically just allowed to think about themselves, to be absorbed in their own thoughts, and think about their problems, because quite often in life we get so absorbed with what we're doing. We're in a rat race, we're continually on the move, thinking about this, that, and the other. We seldom take the opportunity to just think about ourselves, and what we want out of life, and to look after ourselves. And unless we actually start doing that more, then we're ultimately doing ourselves a disservice. Yes, not everybody suffers from mental health, but unfortunately, it's one of those things that can sort of creep up on you, before you realize it. And I'm not saying I've never suffered badly with it, but certainly over maybe like the past year, especially, I've been more consciously aware of my own thoughts and feelings, and um, trying to sort of gain control and think about myself. And you know, one thing that you should always do as well is to try and concentrate on your health as well.
Yeah.
Because I found actually by exercising and actually taking myself off social media, affording the time to exercise, that's also afforded me the opportunity to focus on my health and to think about myself. And by becoming a little bit healthier, I'm a lot more mentally stronger as a result of that. And people, you've got to learn, I suppose, to be a little selfish in life, because unless you focus on yourself, then you can't focus on others. I know I spoke to, and I know this guy too, but over the past couple of days I spoke to a mutual friend of ours, Richard Carrigan.
Yeah.
And he was asked by, I think it was like a salesperson, I'm presuming he was on a sales course, and he was asked the question, who's the most important person in your life? And the Richard had answered, well, probably my wife or kids. And the guy said, wrong answer. And
Yourself.
and even Richard said, like, who's this guy to tell me that I'm wrong
Yeah.
when I'm telling him, who's the most important person in life? And they said, you're the most important person in your life, because if you don't put yourself as number one, then you can't look after anybody else sufficiently. So take time out of your day, think about yourself, and if you have got problems and concerns, reach out to somebody.
Yeah, I think people tend to forget what other people are going through, and it's so easy in a world full of social media and distractions to just get lost in like your thoughts, and everything sits in the background and everything just rushes by at 100 miles an hour. But it's when
Mhm.
you do eventually take, like it, as you say, it creeps up and comes out of nowhere and sort of falls on you. At that point, it's like, well, what do you then do about it? But if
Yeah.
you're actively trying to do it and you're looking past those distractions and taking time for yourself, it can make a world of difference. And obviously there's the cliche of food for thought, but in eating healthily and in doing exercise, at the end of the day, your brain's a muscle. You look after it, it looks after you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it makes the world a difference.
It does, yeah. Look after yourself, and then obviously everything else will fall into place. You can't look after other people without looking after yourself.
Such a beautiful place to end on. And I just have one more question, which is,
Mhm.
what are your plans for the future? Do you have anything in the pipeline that you can maybe give us a little tease of, just to keep the
Mm,
listeners looking forward to things? Or
yeah.
is it all a bit hush hush and you want to keep it
No,
under wraps for now?
there's. I mean, to be honest, I've covered probably the primary things. As I say, I want to focus on obviously bringing minds back. So, obviously, start early on organising that. This problem that I posed, AI.
Yeah.
I want to work and refine that. There is one thing that I can discuss. I don't actually know. Have I even got it? No, I don't know if I had the prototype here, but I am working on a project which is like a revelation of a thought of word. But I think again, it's, that's been done to death. Let's face it, there's many different avenues there for doing that, but I think the approach which I've taken is one that I'm most proud of, because it sort of resonates in my mind. Everything that I say as part of the script and then the presentation just makes perfect sense as to why they should be thinking of a word in the first place, why we can't just have somebody think of a word and reveal that, what, like a random word which is in somebody's head. So yeah, it's a book test of sorts, is what I can say. And that, as I say, I'm very enamored with, because it doesn't use conventional methods. And again, that's probably what I'm most proud of, because I've never drew inspiration from anywhere else. Again, it's something which is unique. Yes, obviously, the think a card plot has already existed in the past, but I've created some very new, unique methods for that. And actually, incidentally, on that note, I was speaking to Gabriel Valen, who we've mentioned several times, at Blackpool. And he sort of he made a very potent suggestion to me at Blackpool, because I said, look, I'm nigh on there. Like, there's only so far that I can push this, but I'm almost there. And there's just one little hurdle left across to make what I feel would be the most perfect Thinker card ever created. And Gabrielle made a good suggestion at Blackpool that has put me like one step closer to that goal. So yeah, so there maybe next year another rendition, but every one of these ideas is building upon the last. So yeah, thought of card, the breakthrough with that I'm gunning for, and then this book test of sorts is another one. So they're two key projects along with Minds, which you can look forward to in the future. And possibly, because a lot of people have been asking us about it, the missing piece. So obviously the first book that I ever released was called Piece of My Mind, and it was my intention basically to make a trilogy. So basically the Piece of My Mind was the first book, the second installment was The Missing Piece, and then the third one, which I don't think I've mentioned anywhere publicly, is going to be called The Final Picture. So Piece of My Mind, Missing Piece, and Final Picture. And then I'm going to cork it, and then legacy. But that's if I get around to it. But yeah, a lot of that is sitting. It's about halfway finished. So really, because I've been scaling down on ideas from other people, I'm going to sort of start putting effort back in to get that finished, because I think I've been saying it's coming soon for probably about 5 years now, and haven't progressed much. So yeah, so that would be another nice one if I can get that out at some point this year. I think that would be nice too. So for everybody who's been asking, I am trying to finish it if I can get that time to do so. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, this conversation's been incredibly insightful for myself, and I'm sure everybody listening will attain to the knowledge that's been spread here. So thank you very much for giving your time. If anybody's looking for your products or looking to find you, where's the best place to do that?
So you can head over to www.mindfx, that's F for Freddy, X for X-ray.co.uk. So mindfx.co.uk. You can see all of my products. There's some basic information about me and past projects and so forth that you can learn about. Or reach out on Facebook. But bear in mind, I'm generally only on about once a week. So if you don't get a reply straight away, please don't think I'm ignoring you. But if there is any questions, do send me a message. I do endeavour to answer every message that comes through. So I mightn't be the fastest on there because of obvious reasons. I'm distancing myself a little bit, but I do get back to everybody. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing your time. Obviously, for those that are listening, if you have enjoyed the conversation, please do obviously subscribe or leave a review or share it with other friends so they can hear this information too. And we obviously have a lot of incredible guests in the pipeline as well that we'd love for you guys to see and hear. So please do check it out, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Goodbye.